to greet you all this morning in Jesus' name. It is wonderful to be here. I have already felt a strong presence of the Lord here, I believe. And so, yeah, it's certainly good to see everybody again and to listen into what we've already heard was a great blessing. So, for a message this morning, I was pondering first of the week what always wondering what is the need of the hour, what do we need, not so much what we want, but what do we need. And I thought about the prophets, the patriarchs, Noah and Abraham, and that succession of prophets. And there's so many neat stories in there. There were such they accomplished such amazing things, them and their wives, and they changed history in their time, and God used them in mighty ways. And I wondered, why go to the Old Testament? What is my point in going through that? And then I found this verse in Luke 24 that really spoke to me. It says, this is when, after Jesus rose from the dead, and two of the disciples were walking there towards Emmaus, and Jesus showed up and joined with and walked with them. And they were telling him about all the things that happened, and they asked Jesus, don't you know what's going on? They crucified this man, and of course they didn't know that this was Jesus beside him. And then Jesus, it says in verse 27, and beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded unto them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. And I said, wow, if Jesus did that, that's an example for us. And Stephen did it as well. When they killed Stephen, he went back. And different times you read that people went back to the Old Testament prophets. So Jesus expounded on all the prophets, and because in all these prophets is a picture of himself. And I want to do that this morning. And I've titled this message, Saul's Armour or David's Sling. And I'll get to that eventually. Saul's Armour or David's Sling. I had to think, when I was studying this, I had to think back when I was a boy, and some of you can identify this. We have to have communion all day, and our preachers would expound on this, starting at Adam, and they go through all the prophets and all up to the New Testament, and then through the sufferings of Christ. And for me, when I was a little boy, that was pretty challenging for me to sit through all that. But today I'm glad for that. I feel I still benefit from that. And I think it's important, that we teach the children and we know the succession, the order in which they came. Sometimes I have to go back and have to refresh my memory on that, in what order that they were. So I want to start with Noah this morning, in Genesis chapter 6, and I'll just be paraphrasing a lot of these things. These accounts, and of course the story of Noah, we're all familiar with that, how God created mankind and people became wicked and evil, and God looked down and it repented him that he made man. He was sorry that he created man. I wonder what he's saying today. But Noah was righteous in his generation. And it says there in chapter 6, verse 8, but Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. So God is not into destroying the righteous with the wicked. And Noah built an ark as God told him to. And he took his family in there. Peter refers to that in 1 Peter 3, where it says, few, that is 8 souls were saved. And Noah was a type of Christ preparing. He carried those 8 souls were carried over into another world, into the next world, and preserved for the next world. And so Christ has come, and he invites us to come into his ark, into his plan of salvation, and be preserved to another world. The next one is Abraham and Sarah. And how was Abraham a type or figure of Christ? Abraham was known for his obedience to God. In Genesis chapter 12, this is now after the flood, and people became plentiful again. And I backing up a little bit. God did establish his covenant with Noah. He set the rainbow in the sky. When we see that, we remember. We always think of the ark. We always think of Noah when we see that rainbow and God's covenant. And now here again, God calls on Abraham, and wants to make a covenant. God is always into making covenants. So how was Abraham a type of Christ? Abraham was a peacemaker in Genesis chapter 13. Him and Lot were together. They both had big flocks and herds. And Abraham said to Lot, this land can hardly sustain all our flocks together. Why don't you choose where you want to go? Abraham was not a selfish person. He said, Lot, you pick where you want to go. And Lot chose the greenest spot, the best area, probably the most rainfall, and he went there, and Abraham said, that's fine. But what happened then later, in chapter 14, Abraham was a rescuer. Abraham had to go back and rescue Lot from his situation that he got himself into, and that is how Jesus also came to rescue us. And there's one thing that I just thought about that is really encouraging as we go through these. Like was mentioned this morning, Marcus, thank you for that devotional. Daniel and Joseph are some of the few of the prophets or the characters in the Bible that didn't really mess up. But these men here, these people here that I'm going to mention, and Noah and Abraham, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob, and on down through the line. Some of them, the things they did were really bad. And I had to think, God is still pleased to use those characters, even with their faults, to show himself. That's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing to me. And so Abraham went and he rescued Lot again from his predicament, and Christ rescues us. Abraham was a giver, not a taker. In Genesis 14, verse 21, he says like this, and the king of Sodom said unto Abraham, this was after Abraham had brought Lot back safely, give me the persons and take the goods to thyself. And Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted up mine hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take from a thread even to a shoe latchet, and that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou shouldest say, I have made Abram rich. The things of God are not bought with money. Money is not involved. Abraham was a peacemaker. Jesus made peace between us and God. Abraham was a giver. Jesus gave his life. And if you read these accounts with that mindset of how does this reflect Christ, it's all through. There's really a lot in here. And then Abraham, so it was Noah, then it was Abraham and Sarah, and the next in line was Isaac and Rebekah. Isaac was born to Abraham and Sarah. That is in Genesis 22. So how was Isaac a type of Christ? We don't read a whole lot about Isaac as far as him doing too many outstanding things for the Lord. He was he was offered up as a sacrifice by his father. Abraham, God told Abraham, and I want to spend a little time in explaining this for the children's sake, because these are Bible stories that I grew up with, and we always like Bible stories. But God came to Abraham. Isaac was Abraham's only son, and his son of his old age. They didn't have no children for a long time, and finally they had a little boy. His name was Isaac, and Abraham loved his little boy, like us dads do. We love our children. And one day God taps Abraham on the shoulder and says, "Hey, you go take Isaac." I think he was 13 or something like that. He said, "Go offer him up. Human sacrifice. Kill him." And Abraham was obedient. And that's another thing that is very strong character of Abraham, is he was always obedient. Christ was obedient in everything also. So Abraham took his son, he took his servants and his donkeys and loaded them up with wood, took some coals, whatever, and Isaac, and they went on a 3 days journey. God told him where to go. And when they got there, they unloaded the wood, and Isaac said, "Dad, here's the wood and the fire. Where's the lamb?" And Abraham, this is hard. This is hard stuff. Abraham says, God will provide. God will provide the lamb. And then he proceeded to tie up his son, lay him on the altar, and at the last minute, an angel from heaven came down and said, "Oh, Abraham, hold it. Don't hurt your son." My, what a relief that must have been to Abraham. Because Abraham was just ready to do it. It was in his heart. He was going to follow through with it. But God stopped him just in time. God is always on time. And so Isaac is a type of Christ in that he was offered up by his father, allowed or ordered that he was offered up as a sacrifice for sin for us. And then from Isaac grew up and went on and married Rebekah. And then Isaac and Rebekah, they had twins, Jacob and Esau, but the blessing was on Jacob. It followed Jacob, and Jacob married Rachel. Jacob and Rachel. Genesis 28. We go for that. So how was Jacob a type of Christ? And Jacob was also called Israel. That's where we get the name the children of Israel. But even after his name change, that God came and he blessed Jacob and he changed his name, he still went a lot by Jacob. So how is Christ reflected in Jacob? In Genesis 28, verse 10, we have the incident where Jacob was traveling and he came in a certain place and the sun was setting, and he took some stones of that place and put them for his pillows and lay down in that place to sleep. This is in Genesis 28, verse 12. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. So Jacob had this vision, and this ladder reaching to heaven, and the angels of God up and down, and God standing at the top. And I believe that's the way it is today for his children. God's angels are communicating, and conveying messages, if you would, back and forth to God on our behalf. Jacob prevailed with God. In Genesis chapter 32, we know that when Esau came towards Jacob with all his men, Jacob felt that Esau was coming to take revenge. Maybe I'll just back up a little bit and say how Jacob, when Isaac was old and ready to die, he wanted to bless Jacob. He wanted to bless Esau, his son, his oldest son. Esau was the oldest. And his mother said to Esau, "Go out and kill a little lamb and put the skin on your arms and cook up the meat and give it to your dad for a meal." and while Esau was out hunting. So Esau, it didn't take long for Jacob to get this land ready. It was right there. But we know how it is. Us hunters know how it is. When you go out there, you don't always get it right away. And Esau was out there hunting, and so Jacob came in with this good meal for his dad and gave it to his dad. His dad ate it, and he was blessed. And his dad blessed him. And then pretty soon Esau came and said, "Here, Dad, here's your meal, and you can bless me." And Isaac said, "Oh, I just did bless somebody. Wasn't that you?" "Nope." And so Jacob, between him and his mom, they set this up. So he received the blessing. And so now, catching up with my story here, here comes Esau towards Jacob, and Jacob feels now Esau is going to come to get revenge. And Jacob wrestled all night with God, and he prevailed with God. Jesus prevailed with God. And so that's, we just see Christ in so many ways. And the next one is, so Jacob and Rachel, they had Israel. Israel was born to them in Genesis 37. So Israel was born to Jacob, and Jacob, Israel. Okay. I'll start reading here in verse 37, in chapter 37 of Genesis. And Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. And Joseph was born to Jacob. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. The reason I was a little confused there, because Jacob was also called Israel. So anyways, Jacob made Joseph a coat of many colors because he loved him dearly, and his brothers were away tending the flock. And one day, Jacob said, "Joseph, I want you to go and see how your brothers are doing with the sheep." And Joseph was obedient to that. He went, and his brothers were not very nice people. They were, before that, Joseph had dreamed these dreams, and it made their brothers jealous. But his father sent him to his hostile brothers. Jesus also came into a hostile world. And what happened when Joseph finally found his brothers? They said, "Here comes that dreamer. Let's kill him." And the oldest brother didn't want to. He was going to rescue Joseph and let him go. But they put him in a pit where there was no water, and a group of Egyptians came along, and they sold Joseph. And Joseph went to Egypt and didn't see his father again for many years. So how was Joseph a type of Christ? Joseph also rose from the dead in a figure. Joseph, in the times of good times, Joseph laid up in store against the time to come. Christ also has laid up in store for us, and he provided substance for his family to keep them from starving. And so in many ways, Joseph was a type of Christ. And one thing we can see another thing that stands out about Joseph is how he forgave his brethren. When he saw his 11 brothers coming, he could have said, "Well, here's my chance. I'm going to get even." But he proved them. But inside, even while he was seemingly harsh to his brothers, I'm sure he was crying inside. And then he had total forgiveness. And in the end, they made tremendous peace. And even after Jacob died, the brothers said, "Now Dad's dead, now Joseph's going to get even with us. But no, that didn't happen. Joseph is a type of Christ in many, many ways. That brings us to Moses. So what happened, Jacob died, which was called Israel. Joseph and all that generation died. And then, but they were now in the land of Egypt. And they grew plentiful. Children of Israel grew plentiful. They multiplied. And Pharaoh the king Pharaoh was afraid that they're going to take over the land. They're going to take over if they get too plentiful. And he said, kill all the little boys as they're born. And Moses' mom put him in a basket, set him among the reeds, and Pharaoh's daughter went to wash herself, and she took him out. She found him and took him home. Moses grew up, and he was a deliverer for the children of Israel out of Egypt to take them back in the land of Canaan according to his promise and his covenant with Abraham and Isaac. So God is true to his promises. Moses is a type of Christ in that God through him parted the Red Sea so that all the people could safely pass over to another world, to another land. And that's a type of Christ. And on it goes. Moses gave the 10 Commandments and the law. Jesus gave us the Sermon on the Mount and grace to live it out. And then the next one would be David. And now I'll come to my title. How was David a type of Christ? David is known for his courage. David understood the chain of authority. I want to turn to 1 Samuel chapter 17. First Samuel chapter 17. So David was a shepherd boy, and David's brothers were in the military. They were fighting the Philistines. And again, Jesse, David's dad, told David, he said, here, take this food and go check on your brothers. Very similar to what Isaac had told Joseph to go do. Or Jacob, go check on your brothers. And so David rose up obediently, and I'll start reading here in verse 20. And David rose up early, this is in chapter 17. And David rose up early in the morning and left the sheep with a keeper and took and went as Jesse had commanded him. And if you read the account of David, you will see that he never moved without commission. He was always commissioned. He understood that chain of authority. And it commanded him, and he came to the trench as the host was going forth to the fight and shouted for the battle. For Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army. And David left his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage and ran into the army and came and saluted his brethren. See, in verse 20, it says about how David left his sheep with a keeper. He was responsible. He was responsible for his job. He took responsibility. And if we jump over to verse 28, we see Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spake unto the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David, and he said, Why camest thou down hither, and with whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride and the naughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. So he was accusing David for abandoning the sheep, which he didn't do. David had left his sheep with a keeper, and he said, "You just came to see what's going on. You're just nosy," is what he was saying. Well, his dad had sent him, and David said in verse 29, I'll keep reading here. What have I now done? Is there not a cause? And he turned from him toward another and spake after the same manner. And the people answered him again after the former manner. And when the words were heard which David spake, they rehearsed them before Saul, and he sent for him. And David said to Saul, Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, Thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. And David said unto Saul, Thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. This is very significant here. David, as a shepherd boy, watching his sheep, and a lion and a bear, probably 2 separate times, came and took a lamb out of the flock. And David went after him. David went after the bear. He didn't just leave the lamb in the bear's mouth. He says in verse 35, and I went out after him and smote him and delivered it out of his mouth. And just imagine here, David, as he kills the lion or the bear, the lamb is probably mangled up, it's hurting, and David carefully takes it back to the fold and doctors it up and rescues it. And that is a message for us in dads and leaders of the church. There's a tremendous message in that. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. David said, moreover, the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said unto David, go, and the Lord be with thee. He got permission from Saul to go fight this Philistine. And Saul armed David with his armor, and he put on an helmet of brass upon his head. Also he armed him with a coat of mail. And David girded his sword upon his armor, and he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off him. So Saul, when Saul saw that David wanted to go fight the giant, he said, here, David, put my armor on you. And I wondered, Saul was a big man, and David was but a stripling. He wasn't very old. And as I read this and meditated on this, I wondered how often I try to put my armor on someone, try to make them, David knew his sling. He actually considered this armor. And what types do we make with Saul's armor? What is that? What does that mean? In my mind, it would mean worldly answers to our problems. The world's answer as we face problems. Where do we go for answers? Where do we go for help as we face the battles of life? Do we look for Saul's armor? I'm sure if David would have left that armor on, he would have lost the battle. I'm confident he would have. Or maybe maybe we clothe ourselves with dead religion, with no life. But Saul recommended he put this armor on. This was nice, shiny armor. It protected himself. It was to protect himself. That's what this armor does. But David knew his sling. He said, I practice with this sling. I know my sling. I want my sling. See, if we read the Word of God over and over, we get good with it. We know where things are. The scriptures become a part of us. And I think, and David was obviously, he had practiced. He had practiced, target practiced, over and over, repetition. And I always struggle with when it's my turn to preach, am I being repetitious? But Peter says, and maybe I'll get there if I have time, Peter says that even though you know these things and you are established in the present truths, I'm going to continue to teach them. And I've heard it explained this way. If a teacher, you as school teachers, would, that's how you teach your students, right? Over and over and over. If you think you have to bring something new in every day for your first graders, they wouldn't learn very much. But you go back and you repeat. You become repetitious in the teaching. And we learn, and it becomes a part of us. David was this way with his sling. He knew his sling. He wanted his sling. And in verse 40, and he took his staff in his hand and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook and put them in his shepherd's bag, which he had even in his scrip. And his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. I don't know what the matter with me. He got him out of a brook, out of the river of life. These stones were not just laying out on the ground. He got him out of a brook, the river of life. There's rocks in the river of life that will kill your giant that you're facing. You got to get them out of the river of life. They're not just laying on the hillside. They're in the river of life. And the Philistine came on and drew near unto David, and the man that bare the shield went before him. See, Goliath even had an armor bearer. Not only was he decked out in armor, but he had somebody go before him. Like, come on, Goliath. It was 2 against 1, really. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth and ruddy and of a fair countenance. And the Philistine said unto David, Am I a dog that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air and to the beasts of the field. He was so confident. Then said David to the Philistine, now this is David's answer. He said, Thou comest to me with his sword and with his spear and with his shield. But I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee, and take thine head from thee, and I will give the carcass of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air. Now the giant had said, I'm going to give your flesh to the birds of the air. But David said, I'm going to not only give your flesh, but the host of the Philistines to the fowls of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Now they had basically cursed each other, and the stage is set, and who's going to win? We know that already. David didn't know it at that time. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. And the rest of the story we know, how David ran towards the giant, and he took that sling and nailed him right in the forehead. And the giant fell down. David jumped, and I don't know where his armor bearer was. It must have been, he went, David scared him off too, apparently. But his armor bearer wasn't even there to protect Goliath. And David smote the giant. He killed that giant. Moving on, David was a type of Christ in that he was a deliverer for Israel. 5 giants. David had 5 stones that he picked out of the brook, out of the river of life. And I just put down here 5 things that we face today. And there is a rock for every one of these. There is a smooth stone in the river of life for every one of these. The first one I have is fear. Do we fear? I know some people are plagued with that more than others. I have been, and I'm not saying I am not still. The other day I was just meditating. You know, the Bible talks about 2 resurrections. Blessed and holy is he that has part in the first resurrection. And I just pondered this way. I said, am I actually going to be a part of the first resurrection? Will I be? I don't want to cast a doubt in our mind, but I think it's good sometimes to just stop and think, am I actually going to be in that first resurrection? If I am, it's only by the grace of God. Fear. How often did Jesus tell his disciples, be not afraid? Be not afraid. It is I. That's a smooth stone from the brook of life, from the river of life that you can hurl at the giant of fear. Number 2 is discouragement. In Genesis, when Joseph was in prison innocently, he came into prison one day and he saw that two other of the inmates were sad. And Joseph said, why are you so sad today? So Joseph brought with him an atmosphere of cheer into the prison because he knew God was with him. He knew he was innocent. He knew God was with him. He knew all of heaven was on his side. And he said, Lord, if prison is where you want me at this time, then we'll make the best of it. And another time when Paul was put in a castle overnight while they decided what to do with him, and a bunch of men made an oath that they're not going to eat or drink till they kill this guy, the Lord visited Paul through the night. And what did he say to Paul? Paul, you've been misused. Here's what you should tell them. I will bring judgment on them. Don't worry, Paul. I'll deal with them. No. He said, Paul, be of good cheer. Be of good cheer. How can I be of good cheer all the time? I can't by myself. Be of good cheer is what the word is for discouragement. There's so many blessings if we look around. God is on your side. All of heaven is on your side. Be of good cheer. Temptation is another giant that we have to deal with. And I want to give you a smooth rock that you put in your sling for this one. There has no temptation in you, but such as is common to man. But God is faithful. Who will not suffer you to be tempted above that you're able. You can use this against temptation. The Lord knows how to deliver the godly out of temptation. God knows how to do it. Get familiar with these scriptures if you want to win the battle. There has no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that ye are able. I have stood on this one, and it's kept me. Number 4, hurts is a giant that we have to deal with. The smooth stone from the river of life is found in Matthew 18, 15 and 17. Go to thee and him alone. How many problems could be resolved is immediately if we experience hurt from a brother or a sister, go to that person, thee and him alone. That's the recipe. That's the direction. That stone will kill that giant of misunderstanding and growing into big chaos. Go to thee and him alone. Let's make that a part of us. Number 5, afflictions, sickness, accidents. What do we do with those? We don't ask for them. We avoid them at all cost. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 17 and 18, it says this way, for our light affliction which is but for a moment, worketh for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. Your trial that you're currently experiencing is but for a moment, and it's going to work in you. It's going to work grace in your heart. That is, for us, a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. While we look not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. 2 Thessalonians, or 1 Thessalonians chapter 3, 2 and 3. Or I'll just jump into verse 3. That no man should be moved by these afflictions, for yourselves know that we are appointed thereto. Often afflictions, sickness, and accidents brings discouragement. And if we understand the big picture, if we can get a hold and see the big picture that God has for us, it will take care of that giant. One more in 2 Timothy. But watch thou in all things, endure afflictions, do the work of an evangelist. So as these things come on us, there's not a trial or a circumstance in your life that we can't go in. Like Marcus talked about common pulse and water. The sling. This is it right here. We study this and become familiar with it. It will be pulse for us and water that will make us what we need to be. And it will be a sling in your hand, just like David. We take down those giants. Thank you for being here. Look forward to seeing you tonight. Lord bless.